Something you don't really talk about in the book, but seems to be pretty important in the work you do, is that you seem to have a talent for lack of a better term, for friendship. You seem to have a lot of people you know who think of you very warmly, very fondly, who are very comfortable with you. I'm curious how you think about that piece of your life. How do you meet these people and then build an actual personal relationship with so many of them?
Good question. It's a good topic, too. I would say that there are a few pieces of the puzzle that come to mind. The first is that I choose my projects along the lines of what Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, would call systems thinking. So I tend to look not at my life in terms of 5 or 10-year plans, but 6-month projects. And I choose those projects based in part on the relationships and skills that I will develop that could transcend that project. So I'm constantly looking for relationships that can persist and skills that can persist over many, many projects, many, many years, maybe many decades. And with that mindset, I think I tend to be less transactional in how I interact with people. So that's point number one. And underlying that is point number two, and that is an assumption that if you want to develop relationships with someone in almost any field, perhaps any field, there are people within that group that can be close friends of yours. And so you should just strive to develop relationships with those people. You don't have to compromise and develop lots of relationships with people who intrinsically you dislike or don't want to spend time with just for professional purposes. Within that group, you should be able to find someone who threads the needle and is someone who's not only, say, top 1% of what they do, but also someone that you can enjoy having drinks with, hanging out with, and introducing to other people. Those are two of the things that come to mind. And I would also say that, for instance, when it comes to even investing in startups, which I've done a lot of, although I stopped about 2 years ago, but from, say, 2007 to 2015, I was very, very active. And two of the most successful angel investors I know used what they called the beer test or the mall test. And the beer test was, would you invite this person out to have beers with you on a regular basis? And the mall test, although this is kind of antiquated, is if you're walking through a mall and they were coming the opposite direction on the opposite side, say 40 feet away, would you say, hey, how you doing? And run over to see what they're up to? Would you kind of give a polite nod and a wave and continue on your way? Or would you shield your face and sort of look in the opposite direction like Jason Bourne to avoid being detected? And the answer always had to be the first. And that is because, and related to the systems thinking, in the case of, say, startups, you're looking at a 7 to 12 year haul in many cases before a successful exit or not. And you want to enjoy the process. So those are a few. No one's ever asked me that.
I actually want to dig into it a little bit more because I think friendship, given how important it is in people's lives, it's odd how little people actually talk about it. And something that friends of mine have said, or people I know have said, or I've heard people complain about, is just that it becomes harder to create friendships as you get older. When you're younger, there's just a lot of structured places for friendships to develop. There's school, there's summer camp, there's college, you move to DC, you live in a group house. And then, folks get partnered up or they live on their own or whatever it might be. And maybe they do find somebody at work or find somebody in their professional set they like and think they could be friends with. And they go out for a drink, and then it's like, what? What do you do next without that overarching superstructure? So I'm curious about that piece of it. You meet people, you clearly have developed a lot of friendships in different parts of your life. When you meet somebody who you feel like you got that connection with, how do you actually convert that from a professional relationship? You guys went out for beers and talked about startup investing, whatever it might be, to something where you guys are going, as it always seems you are, and surfing in some beautiful tropical locale?
Well, I think that there are a few things worth noting. The first is that I have access to a lot of people, as do you, which creates sometimes the illusion that I maintain weekly interactions with all of these people all the time. And that is simply not the case, because the access comes from developing close relationships with people who are hubs of the wheel. And then you can travel out on their spokes and they can very easily introduce you to the people that you might want to ask a particular question, let's say, or ask to include something in Tools of Titans, for instance. And with the people I develop very close relationships with, which are not that many, I'm actually a closet introvert and I get very drained in large groups. But I find, I do not think this is gender specific, although this tends to be something I experience more with males, is what General Stanley McChrystal would call shared privations. If you want to improve mental toughness and forge bonds, some type of shared suffering is very helpful. And I don't think about it this mechanically, if that makes sense. This is just something I enjoy doing, but I will invite, say, a group of 4 or 5 people to go to the Russian baths or the Russian and Turkish baths in New York to do the hot and the ice plunge or cold plunge in repeating cycles, or to go on, say, a weekend hiking trip that will not just be hot chocolate and gummy bears on flat ground. There will be some type of taxing exercise or suffering involved. Or it could be, like you said, some type of paddleboarding in Costa Rica or something like that, which does have a fear factor and absolutely has a fatigue factor. So those are a few things that come to mind. Group dinners are a less intense way of forging this, but whenever possible, trying to introduce the people I like and value to other people I like and value also spreads the workload a bit, if that makes sense, so that I don't feel like I have to shoulder the weekly interactions with 100 people or 200 people. If I make the proper introductions, which isn't a zero-sum game, it actually improves my sort of social stock in that case, then I can really spend a lot of time in any given city with only 5 or 6 people and still maintain very good rapport and slightly weaker ties, but nonetheless powerful with a much larger group of people. It doesn't have to be that complicated. I remember when the 4-Hour Workweek, the first book I wrote, hit its tipping point. If you backtrack about a month, this was at South by Southwest, and the way I met so-called influencers, who I don't think were even called that at that time, they were bloggers and so on, who I am still friends with to this day. So that is 10 years ago, almost on the date that we were talking. And 10 years later, I'm still friends with almost all of these people. And the way that happened is, rather than going to panels and then bum rushing the panelists, who were very often celebrities in their own worlds, I would go to the moderator, who was never getting the same amount of love, and talk to them for a bit. And then I would just say, I'm at South by Southwest because I wrote my first book. I'm trying to learn more about X, Y, and Z. Is there anybody who comes to mind you think I would really enjoy speaking with? And the wording there is really important. It's not, is there anybody you know who might be able to help me? Because that could get a bunch of douchebags and also just incompatible people into the mix. It was, this is what I'm looking for. Is there anyone you think I would really enjoy speaking with? And I also told them about some of my other non-work hobbies. I'm into this, this, and this, but I'm out at South by Southwest for this, this, and this. Is there anyone you think I would really enjoy speaking with? And then I just followed the breadcrumbs. They would say, talk to Jack Jones. Okay, I talked to Jack Jones. We hang out. We have a couple of beers. We have a great time. Cool. Like, is there anybody else here? I don't know anybody you think I would really enjoy speaking with? Sure. Talk to this person. And I just got bounced around in that way like a pinball, and have maintained relationships with the vast majority of the people that I spent time with.
I'm really fascinated by your initial point here about trying to invite people for a bit of shared suffering right off the bat. It reminds me of a study I read a while ago, and I don't really remember where I read it now, but it was about what conditions foster intimacy quickly. And I mean just intimacy between people, like friendships. And what they said, the 2 of the factors they honed in on there were, 1, unusual experiences, and then 2, unexpected meetings. So the 2 things they explained that one reason summer camp is really good for forming these lifelong friendships, even though people only go for a couple of weeks, is that you have a lot of unusual experiences very quickly, and you run into people there a lot again and again. You're walking to the dining hall or whatever. I didn't go to that much summer camp, so I'm assuming. And it sounds like you're recreating that a little bit as an adult. Oh,
definitely. And I'm also, I think that there's a collateral benefit to chance meetings. So if I invite you, Ezra, to go to the Russian baths, that's not a chance meeting with me, because you know I'm going to be there and you've already met me. But if I say, hey, I'm inviting a group of people to the Russian baths, you should come along. You don't know who those people are. You meet four incredibly interesting folks from different worlds. I benefit from you having those chance encounters. And the whole group as a cohesive entity, and each person individually, and the many sort of different permutations of one-on-one relationships all benefit from the shared suffering. It's a relatively low labor way to forge resilient bonds really, really quickly.